As the convoys converged in Ottawa, a handful of voices became known as, if not the organizational leaders, at least the spiritual leaders of the convoy. And I think by far the woman with the most following and who best reflected the goals of the convoy was Tamara Lich. As you know, Tamara was arrested, held in prison for a month and a half on an incitement to mischief charge. She was persecuted by a zealous prosecutor known for his hefty donations to the Liberal Party, and yet she maintained her composure and good faith the whole time. She was slapped with bail conditions that made it so she couldn't speak candidly, couldn't even travel into certain places without her lawyers. But I'm delighted to say that in one of the greatest achievements that Rebel News has had in our 8 years, Tamara Lich has agreed to publish her memoirs, her autobiography, a book that's part history book and part inside story and all autobiographical, about those momentous days and about who she herself is. The book is called Hold the Line, and it's her story from the heart of the trucker convoy, and she joins us now via Skype from her home in Medicine Hat. Tamara Lich, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. I've enjoyed getting to know you a little bit over the recent weeks. I am extremely excited that we are publishing your autobiography, and I couldn't be prouder that it hit #1 on the Amazon.ca bestseller list in its very first day.
Crazy. I'm still stunned, actually. I never anticipated it would take off that quickly. So thank you and everybody at Rebel too for all your help. This has just been an amazing journey.
Well, it's an excellent book, and I don't want to say that I'm surprised by that. I mean, I knew it would be excellent. I mean, you have a lot of thoughtful things to say, but it's genuinely, there's details in there that have never been written or published before. I think you show your heart. You're kinder, I think, than many people would be, having been through what you've been through. And I think your love for country is what shows through. And again, I think other people having been through what you went through would come out maybe sour or hostile or combative. I think you met hate with love. I say that as, you know, we published the book, obviously we like it, but the book surprised me a little bit.
Well, I'm not a very angry person. I don't think that that's how you solve problems, is by getting angry and stomping your feet and being bitter. I always, from day one, maintained that we were going to Ottawa in peace. We were just calling for love and unity and respecting the police officers. We just wanted to be heard. And you know, sitting through the POEC and all the stuff that we've been through since, I come away with thinking with the same point of view that we did everything right. Mm-hmm. You know, we saw the risks involved and we mitigated them at every turn. And I'm proud. I'm very proud of the people that I've been fortunate enough to work with throughout this last year and a half. We've become like family. I'm very grateful that I have an opportunity to share my story, what my experience was like in Ottawa, and how, like, my perspective. And I think people were curious about it. So I think it'll answer a lot of questions for a lot of people.
You know, I think it will. And I think it is a kind of fact check, not just on the government, but on the regime media. I mean, let me give you one example. I mean, I only met you in recent months, and I had heard that you were Métis, and I mean, in some ways that's irrelevant. If you were black or white or whatever, it doesn't matter. You're a Canadian. But I know that in our current media culture, if someone is Indigenous, that's an interesting plus. That shows that they're part of a diverse movement and tolerant. And it's a plus that, you know, journalists mention. And the only thing I read about your Indigenous background was that it was in question. And you treat that in the book, and you say it's not in question. It's absolutely true. But even the Aboriginal People's TV network, which should have cheered you on as a champion, it was almost like they knew their mission was to discredit you, even on something as basic as your your ethnic identity. Reading your book was an enormous fact check. Almost everything I had read about you through the mainstream media turned out to be false.
That's correct. I think that was one of the greatest things that we exposed in Ottawa, was the fact that the narrative that was crafted, they were crafting. And as you saw when the evidence came out at the POEC, that narrative was crafted before I even met Chris Barber in person. And that was January the 24th. So they already had a whole narrative crafted. I think the convoy exposed them for what they are. And I know, speaking for myself and on behalf of a lot of the other organizers, we are so grateful to organizations like Rebel News and True North and all the, like Rupus and Rihanna, all the journalists that actually got off their butts and went down and talked to people and recognized immediately that what they were seeing on the ground was not what they were seeing on the news. And that is to your credit.
Well, thank you for that. But it's just astonishing because listen, I'm proud of Rebel News, and we covered the trucker convoy pretty comprehensively. But most Canadians still get their news from traditional sources. The CBC is in decline, but it still is huge. And CTV and Global and the Toronto Star and Globe and Mail, I got a question for you. Have you, and maybe the answer is yes, by the way, have you ever been interviewed on a CBC television program? Have you ever been invited? You're shaking your head. No, you never.
No, not since then. I know I had emails from CTV's Glenn McGregor.
Oh, he's extremely hostile to you.
He's something else.
But how about, okay, and I'm glad you mentioned that. So I think he was probably trying to trap you. But you're a newsmaker, and again, the fact that you're a woman is interesting, but it's not the story here. It's an interesting addition to the story. And again, if you were on the other side of the ideological spectrum, you would be, look at this woman leader, young Indigenous woman fighting the world. Like it would be, they would sing your praises. You would be given honorary degrees at university. You would be invited to give a TED talk or something at U of T.
Well, it checks all their boxes,
And that's not the most important thing is what you did. But I'm just thinking of how the media, if they covered you at all, came out to destroy you. Sorry, let me just ask it clearly, because you said Glenn McGregor reached out to you once, and he's sort of a muckraking CTV reporter who extremely partisan. But how about any of the talk shows? Like CBC has a panel called At Issue, hosted by Rosemary Barton, there are some talk shows, Global has them, CTV has them, where they have newsmakers on and ask them questions. Were you ever invited on any of these panel shows? And maybe you were. I just don't know if you were.
No, I haven't.
Never
with the
once.
Exception of while I was in Ottawa, I was approached by a gentleman from the Fifth Estate.
Okay.
And I think you probably saw that. I believe they had James Bowder and Pat King on their show. I declined
right.
when they asked me, because I wasn't obviously at that point. This was a week or two into the protest. Actually, I think it was the day the Emergency Act was invoked, and I did that press conference with the Honorable Brian Peckford. And this gentleman approached me from the Fifth Estate after that, and I just said, no, thank you.
Yeah. And again, the Fifth Estate, not really a panel show, they're an investigative, they're basically a hit team to go. So I appreciate you telling me that, because I did ask, did any reach out? But if so you were never invited on a CBC panel, like they've got this 24-hour news channel, and they have 24-hour radio. They've got a lot of different channels. No one ever said, hey, here's the woman at the heart of this thing. She's also an Indigenous woman from the West who's suddenly become this leader of this movement. Let's ask her some questions. Let's ask her some tough questions. Let's ask her some really good questions. That never once. I think you're the newsmaker of the year. No. The truckers were surely the story of the year. They would rather write about you than talk to you, because you might give answers they didn't want.
Well, it wouldn't fit their narrative.
That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day Then I interview a fascinating guest either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.